it really speaks to this problem that I was talking to earlier. And the reason why I started to pick up on that when I was working in these programs is that there is something going on for men in this society. And it's probably a change in energy or change in narrative of what is expected from a man, and also trying to keep true to those old narratives that were told. I feel like there's a lot of confusion for men out there. But yeah, I guess in my own journey of masculinity and kind of men's mental health, I kind of had a bit of a breakdown in my later 20s in my life after a long-term relationship breakup. And, you know, I was kind of confronted with mental illness, which sounds crazy even after some of the things that I grew up with. And I don't know, I was unscathed from mental health until this point in my life. So just couldn't even really understand it when people, and I was obviously attending professional developments and trying my best to learn and understand this. But because I hadn't experienced it firsthand, I was like, what is everyone talking about? And then after kind of dwindling in my own kind of depression and anxiety that came up, you know, kind of around the same time for a lot of people during COVID and during those real difficult times of lockdown and those mundane days, and kind of a deep reflective period, like who the fuck am I and where the fuck am I going and what the fuck is this world that we're living in? I was confronted with some pretty full-on realities of just like how dark the world can get and how tricky the world can get, and that made me feel like shit, I need to get some help. And I'm glad that I've kind of got this inner voice, ego, whatever you want to call it, that protects myself in that regard. It's like, oh, okay, you're not feeling well. Maybe let's try to get a mental health plan, or maybe let's look at some alternative routes of how to kind of check yourself. And yeah, I'm super glad that I did that. Like, I don't want to be a man that ends up, you know, nowhere and by myself and lonely. So I'm trying to strive towards not that direction. And that pretty much means I want to clear myself up and give myself as much tools to lean on when needed. So yeah, I guess one of the tools that I discovered in this kind of work was a men's group, or they're called men's gatherings, and the organization is called Gathering Men. And it's based off this, you know, 50,000, 60,000 year old idea that men have always had meets and sharing circles and men's business and women's business, if you will, and to just continue to follow through on that tradition and to hold to. So, you know, I was exposed to this through my workplace. There was someone volunteering in the garden, and her partner was one of the lead workers at Gathering Men. And he invited me down to Tanderham, a space in Daylesford, which is just this beautiful country, where I did a 3-day men's retreat. And
whoa.
Yeah, pretty intense. And I would have been like 27, maybe 28, and just kind of come out of a big breakup and had a lot of energy going on. And then off I go to this men's group just to kind of focus in on what the fuck's going on for me, which I'll just stop and just kind of like acknowledge that is the most difficult step, is turning up and showing up. You know, it's like I was aware that I was in a bit of a space. I was aware that I was offered this opportunity to go and do this men's gathering where I knew that I would have to kind of front up to some of my issues.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just commend any person who fronts up to do the work on themselves and actually turn up and attend a workshop or go do some meditation or do a sharing circle. You know, I turned up to a men's gathering for 3 days and had no idea what the fuck I was in store for, you know?
Just before you explain the gathering, I think it's really worth noting, and I'd love to just hear about it a little bit. I don't expect you to go too deep into specifics or anything, man, but like, I think it's really helpful for people out there, men out there, to just who might be feeling like they're the only one who's ever gone through what they're going through. You know, like no one else has ever felt what I've felt. Can you at least try and explain what kind of headspace you were in or like the things that you were feeling or the things that you were thinking about yourself, or the way that you were viewing your own life and where you're at before you had to make that jump and get some help, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. And look, it's a tricky space navigating depression. And anxiety kind of came hand in hand with depression. But I think for what was going on for me was a bit of loneliness and a bit of fear of what's the future hold, and fear of who am I going to become, and the weight of kind of society in a way, and the weight of my own ego or my own inner voice kind of being like, I thought you were going to do this at this point in your life, and now kind of look at where you are, and kind of comparing the two to two, and just kind of creating a bit of maybe a bit of a pity party. I think my emotions were valued, and I wouldn't go to say that I was just pitying myself. I think they were valid, but just recognizing, emotional intelligence is something that I've always had quite a knack for since I was a young person. Maybe it was just through navigating through my upbringing, but recognizing like, oh shit, like I'm feeling a bit low, I'm feeling a bit sad, and then 3 weeks later, oh, this feeling is still around, and then 6 weeks later, a few months later, half a year's gone by, and you're like, what the fuck have I done for this last 6 months except for be a bit of a sad person? And I think those were the kind of realities that I was dealing with at the time to give me the courage or build the momentum to start wanting to like kind of check into my health. And, I think that I needed to sit in those 3 weeks, 6 weeks, half a year of sadness. I truly believe that sometimes those emotions are needed to get to where we're going. I think it's just important to recognize them and to flag them, and then to address them when it feels right for you, and when you've got that courage, or I like to use it as momentum. It's like, when you've been feeling shit for a few weeks, it's like, fucking hell, like I want to feel good, like come on. Yeah. And that momentum is like, pushing through. So I think that's kind of what got me to turn up to the men's gathering.
It's pretty crazy. And I think it's also worth noting that, everyone goes through their own experience, and I've gone through mine as well. And like the only experience I can really speak about is my own. So who knows if what I felt is what anyone else has felt. You just don't know, right? We try through conversations like this to see if there's any connecting points, but it's a real thing when something like a relationship that you've been in forever, for other people it might be something else that you've been in for a long time. You build a mental model of who you are, and you build a mental model of where your life is going to go, and you wholeheartedly believe in that. And then as soon as you lose the relationship, you lose the job, you lose the friend, you lose the community, you lose a loved one, whatever it is, everything you thought about yourself and where you were going is fucking gone instantly. Everything that you were resting all of your hopes and all of your dreams on, everything you were resting all of your self-worth on, everything you were resting your human potential on, and your reputation and your respect, all those things that you rested on, the fucking shelf just disappears. So it's a real thing when you have to rebuild that, right? It's not something you can just like
it is a real thing. And just to kind of touch on that, it's like what was going on for me in that time, it wasn't like, oh, this relationship specifically, or this ending to a relationship specifically sparked my decline in mental health. It was more so a time and period of my life where, like you were saying, all those security networks, a loving partner, a relationship, all the things that come with that, and a friendship circle that's understanding and understands where I'm at in that relationship, and then also just the journey of life and age and those types of things. I think for me it was a combination of just landing somewhere, or getting chewed up and spat out, I would probably say. And landing somewhere which was like a little bit unknown. Like, I had gotten older. Things in my life were different, and a lot of close people in my life had left, and then I had to kind of restart, And I think that was what was kind of building in for me. But yeah, it is interesting, this kind of common thread of feeling like no one else would understand or no one else knows what I'm going through. I've heard this so many times that I know that it's a real feeling, it's not, people aren't just speaking shit.
Yeah.
It's like when you're in it, when you're in the darkest depths of your kind of psyche, you do feel like you're the only one there. And that's why for me, this men's gathering was such a great and profound experience for me, is because, you're turning up and you're with a whole group of other people who have turned up.
How many people are there? Like, what's the setup?
I think each gathering's different, and I've started to see across Australia that a lot of men's groups are starting to pop up, which is just great. But this specific gathering I went to, there would have been about 15 to 16 blokes.
Yeah.
And I was by far the youngest, maybe by 15 years. So I was a little bit out of my depth, although I felt really humbled and respected the moment I got there, that all these men were quite, they were happy to see a younger person turning up and kind of facing some of these realities. And I think this was pretty much what I was about to uncover when I went on this trip is, everyone's got issues. Everyone's got the demons going on. And I think when you get perspective of what that it's not just you who's, dealing with your own sorrows, it's everyone's kind of carrying their own sorrows. And when you have the opportunity to be in a safe space where you can share and talk to those and feel listened to, it's incredibly important. And you realize the issues that you are grappling with, they don't vanish, they don't go away, they're still there. But it just kind of, you feel a sense of it's bigger than just your issues, which is, when you get into that spot where it's like no one is anyone else going through this. No one else is going to understand this. That kind of vanishes. And when you feel like it's a bigger thing than just yourself, there's a sense of like, okay, well, everyone's kind of going through it, and how am I going to get through this? At least that's what happened for me. Obviously, every individual person's experience is different. For me, this was a great opportunity for me at where I was in my life, and like I said, just showing up to do the work, it allowed me to feel like, hey, at least I'm listening to myself and trying to do something for myself to better it, rather than, just dwindle and kind of potentially go down worse options. There's other tools to fix your problems, for sure, and yeah, so I'm just happy that this was a bit of a healthy, mindful approach. And yeah, and I think, I'm happy I went.
I think it's a really difficult one for a lot of guys out there. I haven't been to a men's group before, so or anything of that. I wouldn't say I've done anything like that before. I've got some good friends who I can confide in, have some good conversations with, which gives me that, I believe. But for people who haven't gone to a men's group before, it's a bit of a daunting thing, It's to just even step into that space, or even decide to step in that space. You got to go through this whole thing of even acknowledging why you should even do that, and there's a lot of shame around being a guy and struggling with your feelings.
100%.
There's heaps of shame around it.
Yeah.
And so even acknowledging it to yourself brings more shame.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a repeating cycle of shame and guilt
100%.
in a lot of ways. So trying to face that is fucking hard. What were for when you're actually at this retreat, just for lack of a better word, gathering, are you like camping? Are you out in the bush?
Yeah.
What's the setup?
Awesome. Like, it's like the way this organization was doing it was, it's pretty much like an opportunity to detox as well. So there's no alcohol, there's no cigarettes, there's no drugs. It's
do they run them now? Like, can anyone go do these? Or
100%. A quick plug: Gathering Men, Melbourne-based group. Awesome. If you need to, or if you want to experience something like this, it doesn't need to be about your own mental health. It can be about connecting to land,
cool,
and country. Check them out. They've got some great offerings. They've got metropolitan gatherings in Melbourne. They've also got the camping gatherings that happen out in Daylesford or Tarandum, which, just really, really good stuff they're doing.
Awesome. I'll chuck the links in the bio and everything so people can check it out. So what did you personally get out of this? Like when you say you go in to do the work, that word's thrown out a lot, and I think it means a lot of people say doing the work is good, but often we don't know what the fucking work is. You know, when you were there, like what would you consider the work that you did?
I think the work is removing what's in your head that's so personal and so entwined into our whole being, and speaking to it in a public or in a setting where someone's listening. I think for me that is doing the work. I mean, confronting all those emotions, those anxieties. Am I going to be? Are people going to look at me like I'm a pussy because I'm going to do this men's gathering? All that. That wasn't as hard as talking to the demons that are going on for me, Yeah. And for me to be able to talk to those demons in a space, be listened to, be heard, and be supported in a brotherhood, because that's what we're there. We're just a bunch of men who are gathering on country to do this kind of sacred kind of tradition, if you will, is just to show up and to kind of talk about what's going on. So I think for me, doing the work was naming what's going on for you and how that's affecting you. I think that's really powerful for anyone to do when you actually project the words out of your mouth. And you essentially, for me, what's happening is I'm putting it out into the universe rather than keeping it in my soul and body and mind, you know? And I feel like in doing that, in a space where you can be listened to and heard, that's incredibly powerful. That's a lot of healing. That's a lot of, there's a lot going on there. So I think that was the biggest thing for me. But I mean, the gathering as a whole is just like, it's super wholesome. This specific retreat chose to go vegan, which also I just kind of liked, I wasn't smoking, I wasn't drinking, I was eating good, wholesome food. All this playing into like a healthy living, functioning.
Just clean.
Yeah, just clean and honest, and one with nature. Like I said, it's a great opportunity to connect to country and also learn about Indigenous culture. Like this specific place, Tandarum, is incredible, and there's so much history that's happened in this space. And like I was saying before, like Indigenous people have been meeting in this space and having men's group gatherings for over 50,000 years,
Fuck.
And, this organization, Gathering Men, they are tied into a lot of the elders, and there's been a lot of permissions given to do the work on their land.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, there's smoking ceremonies. We use the natural leaves from the environment that we're around, and it's the cherry ballard, the gum leaves. And so there's a lot of like connectedness and groundedness. We did some awesome like early morning walks, sunrise, and like kind of on one mountain you'd have the sun setting, on the other mountain you'd have the moon rising. It's just like this crazy world that you're kind of living in, and even just choosing to do the experience barefoot and take it to that next level where you're being mindful of, once again, yourself, that kind of connection to land. Also great healing benefits, It's like even if you can't talk to your direct issue or what's going on for you, because it's not as easy as that, Just the experience as a whole was like, doing all the things to feel okay and to give myself a bit of natural serotonin was also at play at these experiences. And just even being a bit playful on those experiences, like going for a nude dip in a swamp, and just kind of, you don't really get to have those experiences with men that much, and touching on that kind of toxic masculinity is like, I definitely didn't really have too much exposure to healthy, good role model men in my life. A lot of the men who were in my life were quite the opposite, and projecting terrible views and all this power and all this, toxic. Yeah, it's just, it wasn't good. So in this space where you're led by two beautiful men who are showing that it's okay to be vulnerable and that it's okay to show your emotions, and the complete opposite narrative to what we kind of to what a lot of boys and young men grew up hearing was just so refreshing. And I think that in itself was also just a bit eye-opening. It's just like you hear all this shit, you see all this stuff, and the Australian culture is just, it doesn't help it because it's really entwined into who men are in this society. But there are fucking awesome men out there who can be real with their emotions. And I think part of my work, you know, moving forward in my life is to continue to try role model that for any man or boy that I encounter who has maybe been led the other way, that, you know, it is okay to tap into your vulnerability, and, you know, there is actually courage and strength in doing that.